Have you ever looked at your life and felt like everything was falling apart? Maybe it was your family, once close, now divided by hurtful words or broken trust. Maybe it was your finances, weighed down by debt that seems impossible to escape. Maybe it was your health, where every doctor's report feels like another brick pulled out of your wall of strength. Or maybe it was your own heart, tired, worn out, and wondering if there's anything left worth rebuilding. Brokenness takes many forms. For some, it looks like a marriage that once felt strong, but is now barely holding together. For others, it is the loss of a dream they thought would shape their future. And for many, it's the simple exhaustion of carrying burdens day after day, wondering if anyone notices how heavy they've become. Brokenness doesn't just affect circumstances, it seeps into the soul, convincing us that hope is gone. When everything feels broken, discouragement whispers, "Why try? It's too late. The damage is too deep." And when those lies settle in, they rob us of the courage to start again, because starting again feels risky. It feels like exposing yourself to more disappointment, more pain. So instead, we settle in the rubble, telling ourselves, this is just how life is now. But what if the story doesn't have to end there? What if brokenness is not the final word? The Bible shows us again and again that God is a builder, a restorer, a rebuilder of lives and hearts. He doesn't ignore the rubble. He steps into it and shows us how hope can rise again. This is the story of Nehemiah. He lived far away from his homeland, serving as a cupbearer to the king. From the outside, he looked secure and comfortable. But when news reached him that the walls of Jerusalem were in ruins and its gates burned with fire, his heart broke. He wept, fasted, and prayed. Nehemiah could not ignore the brokenness of his people. And in that moment, God began to stir a mission in his heart, a mission to rebuild hope when everything seemed lost. When Nehemiah heard that the walls of Jerusalem were broken and its gates burned, he didn't shrug it off as someone else's problem. He wept. He mourned for days, but he didn't stop there. He prayed. His prayer was raw and honest, confessing the sins of his people and pleading for God's mercy. He acknowledged the brokenness, but also clung to God's promises that if his people returned to him, he would gather them and restore them. Nehemiah was not a priest or prophet. He was a cupbearer to the king, a position of trust, but not of authority. On his own, he had no power to rebuild a city. Yet when God places a burden on your heart, he also provides the strength and opportunity to act. One day, the king noticed Nehemiah's sadness and asked why his face looked troubled. With courage and trembling, Nehemiah explained the condition of Jerusalem. Then something remarkable happened. Instead of punishing Nehemiah for his sorrow, the king granted his request. He gave him letters of authority, safe passage, and even resources to rebuild. What seemed impossible became possible because Nehemiah carried his burden to God first. When Nehemiah arrived in Jerusalem, he didn't announce his plans immediately. He inspected the broken walls by night, seeing with his own eyes the rubble and the ruins. Then he gathered the people and spoke words of hope. "Come, let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem, and we will no longer be in disgrace." The people responded, "Let us start rebuilding." And together they began the work. But rebuilding was not easy. Enemies mocked them, saying their efforts were foolish and doomed to fail. Threats came from outside, and discouragement rose from within. Some workers grew tired, others were afraid, and still others doubted if the wall could ever be finished. Yet Nehemiah led with faith. He reminded the people, "Do not be afraid. Remember the Lord who is great and awesome, and fight for your families, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your homes." Half the people worked while the other half stood guard. Builders carried materials in one hand and held weapons in the other. It was not just construction, it was perseverance, faith, and unity. Brick by brick, section by section, the wall began to rise again. And then, against all odds, the wall was completed in just 52 days. What had stood in ruins for decades was restored in less than 2 months because the people trusted God and worked together. Their enemies were silenced, and all who saw it recognized that this work had been accomplished with the help of God. Nehemiah's mission was not simply about rebuilding walls. It was about rebuilding identity, restoring hope, and proving that God had not abandoned his people. Nehemiah's story is not just about ancient walls, it is about the God who rebuilds what is broken. The ruins of Jerusalem represented more than fallen stones. They symbolized despair, loss, and shame. And when those walls rose again, it was a picture of hope restored. The same God who helped Nehemiah rebuild a city is the God who can help you rebuild your life. All of us face seasons when something feels shattered. Maybe your confidence was broken after years of failure. Maybe your trust was shattered by betrayal. Maybe your strength has been drained by sickness or your joy stolen by grief. Like the people of Jerusalem, you look at the rubble around you and wonder, can this ever be rebuilt? Nehemiah shows us that the answer is yes, but not by our strength alone. Notice what he did first. He prayed. Before asking the king, before organizing workers, before laying a single stone, Nehemiah cried out to God, "Rebuilding doesn't start with a hammer. It starts with a prayer." The same is true for us. The first step to rebuilding hope is to bring our brokenness to God. Second, Nehemiah didn't rebuild alone. He rallied the people and everyone took part, priests, families, merchants, and common workers. In the same way, God often uses community to restore us. You don't have to carry your burden alone. Sharing your struggle with trusted people can bring strength and courage when your own feels empty. Third, Nehemiah and his people persevered despite opposition. Enemies mocked them, danger surrounded them, and discouragement grew inside the camp. Yet they pressed on, brick by brick. Rebuilding takes time. Healing takes time. But every small step matters. What looked impossible at the start was finished in just 52 days because they didn't quite give up. And finally, Nehemiah reminded the people who their strength came from. Remember the Lord, who is great and awesome. Hope is not built on our ability to control outcomes. It is built on God's faithfulness. Even when the rubble feels overwhelming, He is able to rebuild. So what does this mean for you? It means your story is not finished in the ruins. The broken places in your life can become testimonies of God's restoration. The walls that look too high, the damage that feels too deep, none of it is beyond His power. Like Nehemiah, you may look at your situation and feel small, but with God's help, you can begin again. Nehemiah's story ends with a city rebuilt, but more importantly, a people renewed. The walls were not just stone and mortar, they were symbols of dignity, safety, and belonging. What was once rubble became strength again. And the same God who rebuilt Jerusalem through Nehemiah is the God who can rebuild what feels broken in your life. Maybe for you, it's not city walls, but a broken heart. Maybe it's not burned gates, but a relationship that feels beyond repair. Maybe it's not physical ruins, but the quiet discouragement inside telling you there's no point in trying anymore. Whatever your ruins look like, Nehemiah's story is proof that God is still a rebuilder. But here's the key. Nehemiah didn't do it alone, and you don't have to either. Just as he called the people to rise and build together, you can find strength in community. That's why this space exists, not just to tell Bible stories, but to remind you that you are not alone in your struggle. So here's my invitation. In the comments, share one area of your life where you long for rebuilding. Maybe it's your family, your faith, your work, or your sense of hope. Write it down, not to expose your weakness, but to take a step of faith. Because when you share, two things happen. You lighten your own burden, and you may encourage someone else who thought they were the only one facing it. This is not just about watching a video. It's about becoming part of a story where brokenness turns into restoration and despair turns into hope. If Nehemiah's story encouraged you today, take a moment to like this video, subscribe for more weekly encouragement, and share it with someone you know who might feel like their life is in ruins. You never know, your simple share could be the spark that helps someone else start rebuilding. Remember this, rubble is not the end. With God's help, broken walls can rise again, broken hearts can heal, and broken hope can be restored. Just as He was faithful to Nehemiah, He will be faithful to you.